We're joined by Farooq Siddiq, who's from the Bristol Pakistan Association, and also Irish Republican Labour activist Martin Summers. And I asked you in, Farooq, to talk about Pakistan, particularly because I'm just appalled by the obvious murder, assassination, really, of this... it's unbelievable, really, when you look at these things, to see how little coverage something like this gets. It's a Pakistani journalist, Arshad Sharif, who was quite a pro-Imran Khan journalist. I mean, obviously, journalists like to say they're unbiased, but none of them are. And he's been accidentally, in big inverted commas, killed by police over in Kenya. He had to flee Pakistan. He was in the Middle East for a while, and his visitor visa ran out. So he decided to go to Kenya, where he was promptly gunned down by the police. So can you just give us a little bit of a background to this case? Because what it's showing to me is that the supporters of Imran Khan, who's the elected of Pakistan, anyone that supports him is now being targeted by this government. Now, it'd be interesting to know a little bit about the government too, and these figures, Sharif and Zardari, who are now running the show there.
Prime Minister Sharif and his cohort is Zardari. So you had Benazir's party. Do you remember Benazir Bhutto? So hers was a Pakistan People's Party. She was killed, and the party was taken over by her husband, who was known as Mr. 10% because he was a gangster, one of these mafia-type individuals who married into the Bhutto clan. And the Sharifs, well, they were actually manufactured from another political party by the Pakistani army to try and bring that party to heel. And so you have now 13, I believe, political parties from across the Pakistani political spectrum. Only Imran Khan's PTI party now stands outside of the current coalition of the government at the moment. Now, what's happened here is, since Imran Khan has decided that he's not going to go quietly into the night, as was the script handed to him, so anyone that now stands or questions either the government, which was brought in by the Pakistani army in response to a letter by Donald Lu, the Under Secretary of State for the United States, who said that because Imran Khan went to visit Russia, Moscow, on the day that Russia attacked Ukraine, instead of leaving, Imran Khan stayed and tried to complete a deal to buy oil and corn, I think it was, wheat, for his population. He believed, and his view is that regardless of what happens in Western countries, his priority is the Pakistani population who elected him, and his job was to try and bring them, keep prices under control, which he was doing, actually managing quite well up until March 22, when he was ousted. Now, as soon as he made that visit and decided he was going to continue to forge relations with Russia, the American Under Secretary of State started meeting the opposition, brought them together. These are vehemently opposed political parties who despise each other, have called each other thieves and corrupt and to the kingdom come, basically. They all suddenly came together after Donald Lu, Under Secretary of State, told the Pakistani ambassador to the United States that if you remove Imran Khan through a no-confidence motion, all will be forgiven and you can come back to power. Now, this is the Americans telling the Pakistanis who should run their country. And promptly, the next day, Imran Khan's government was subject to a no-confidence motion. And that no-confidence motion, Imran Khan lost only because I think it was 21 members of his own party sold out, literally sold out for it was $200,000 each to leave Imran Khan's government. And that allowed the no-confidence motion to pass. Imran Khan was ousted. Now, as I said, instead of going quietly into the night, Imran Khan then decided to fight back. And he believed he was the subject of a conspiracy, an international conspiracy, concocted by the United States to remove him from power because for a number of reasons. Number one, his calls to make good relations with Russia, putting Pakistan first. And secondly, his denial for the Americans to give them military bases and overflight rights across Pakistani airspace, and also to ban drone attacks by the United States on Pakistani soil. And he actually told the army, he said to the Americans quite openly that I've told my army that if an American drone flies over Pakistan, shoot it down. So that was the beginning of the end of Imran Khan's tenure in power.
Well, I mean, the background to the drones, if I can just interrupt for it, it was horrific, wasn't it? There were, things like wedding parties, funerals, the double tap drone strike where you destroy an event like that with a drone, and then as the rescuers appear over maybe an hour or so later, you then hit those people with another drone. I mean, it's quite understandable that any kind of sovereign country might wish to stop the Americans behaving like this.
Absolutely. There were during Imran Khan's the government that was in charge before, there were 200 drone attacks during the Nawaz Sharif government. During Imran Khan's government, not a single drone attack took place during his power. As soon as he was removed, within 2 weeks, we had the first drone attack. So that just proved the point about Imran Khan and the reason that they wanted to remove him from power. Now, Imran Khan, they expected would, because they accused him of all kinds of stuff, they've thrown all kinds of mud at Imran Khan. Nothing has stuck because his motto has been consistent throughout. He says, have another election. He says he cannot accept the fact that he was removed by non-Pakistanis. He says the only people that can decide who governs Pakistan is Pakistanis. And for that simple stand, he's been fighting. That's all he wants. All he wants is elections. And he says so
what's his stance, latest stance? Because I understand that he's saying that he wants his supporters to just sort of back off from having demonstrations over the last week or so.
Right. So what happened last time, on I think it was May 25th, there was a big march, and they were attacked by the Interior Minister with tear gas, baton charges and all of that, and quite a few people were injured. And the people were fired up to the point that they were going to do basically what happened in Sri Lanka. And Imran Khan didn't want loss of life, so he called off that. He completely pulled back, and he says, let's call it a day. His own supporters turned against him for that because the people were ready. The people stayed on those streets for a couple of weeks before eventually leaving. Now what's happened is since that time, anyone who has been vocal in their support of what we consider in their terminology as independent of free, what's it called? He's calling Hakiki Azadi, which means true freedom march. So that's what he's calling it for. And he says, when he says true freedom, he's saying true freedom since 1947, when we became free, independent from the British Raj. That was our freedom from them, but then we became slaves to the corruption.
Well, I think there's lots of ex-British colonial places that would say the same.
Exactly.
In Africa, for example, with the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, the idea is that, you let the British colonial powers and the international powers allowed certain leaders to emerge of these newly independent countries with a kind of great ideals for the future, and then those that became successful, couldn't be bribed, etc., were simply assassinated.
And that's exactly what's been going on. And what you've found since March 25th is you've had this build-up on both sides. So Imran Khan is saying he wants an election because, as far as he's concerned, only the people of Pakistan should vote and decide who runs Pakistan. And on the other side, you've got the army who are supporting what they call the Pakistan Democratic Movement, I believe they're called, this coalition of the corrupt, basically. Now, their cabinet, the current government cabinet, 60% of the current cabinet is on bail for charges ranging from corruption to murder. The current interior minister has 13 cases registered against him of him killing people, literally murdering people. He's now the interior minister who's basically been given free hand to deal with Imran Khan and his people and his supporters. Now what's happened over the last few months is that anyone that is seen to be supporting Imran Khan in any way, shape or form, and when I say supporting Imran, it means even being slightly critical of the government or the army, is suddenly, and I can't remember this in my lifetime, but apparently it's been happening, is suddenly they're getting arrested, they're being tortured, they're being held naked, stripped naked, tortured, and then the euphemism is their software has been updated, and then they release them. Yeah, because the courts order their release because there was no reason to arrest them in the first place. So once it gets to the courts, they get released. But the thing is that their software has been updated. Now, the reason for stripping them naked, beating them in front of their children, arresting them in their homes. Now, this thing we think, oh, it's nothing, arresting people in their homes. When the police jumps over people's personal home walls, the boundary walls of their homes. In Pakistan, that's considered a massive deal, that this is your personal home. The state has no right to cross those boundaries. Now, under the current government in the last couple of weeks, in the last couple of months, that's been happening almost on a weekly, fortnightly basis, that police have gone over people's home boundaries to arrest them. Sometimes with warrants, sometimes without warrants, only to be released later without charge.
What do you mean? I've got to ask you about what you mean by this updating their software. Is the idea that people have kind of been through a very, very strict and very quick re-education?
Exactly. So basically, TikTokers. I mean, this is the banality of it. This is how pathetic this army has become, or the leaders of the Pakistani army are, that any criticism of the current Chief of Army Staff, General Bajwa, or the current ISI chief, any criticism that they see is a personal attack on them. So they're being called traitors, they're being called all kinds of corrupt, etc., because they all own property abroad, etc. So
it sounds to me as if you could be, just stating a fact about one of these members of the cabinet, and that would be taken. I mean, it's also rather similar to the reverence which the Chinese legal system affords to, well, I call him the Pope. President Xi. You're not allowed to criticise, and this authoritarianism is absolutely horrific, really, in a country like Pakistan.
It absolutely is, and what's shocking is that they're supposed to be a democracy, and that's what's the people leading this charge now are amazingly, they're the students, they're the young people, they are educating, they're standing up and saying enough is enough, what's going on here? We're supposed to be, you keep talking about this being a democracy. The courts still seem to be, although many of those judges are brought out, when the push comes to shove, they tend to take the right course of action. So at the moment, that's the only hope, the last line. But that hasn't stopped all these people. When I say software being updated, it means if you carry on doing what you're doing, next time you're just going to disappear for good. So they suddenly back off, or supposed to back off. And some have, but others have come out even more vociferous against the army. Now, recently, it's come from, 15, 16-year-old TikTokers who've got influential following. They're being just picked up, beaten up for no reason.
I'm also reminded of the Pinochet regime in Chile. This was very similar. It's a fascistic attitude. But could you just talk about this journalist Arshad Sharif? I've been reading about this. I mean, he apparently was quite a popular journalist, TV journalist in Pakistan, and then had to leave Pakistan, and he's just this week been assassinated in Kenya by the police there.
Yeah, so he worked for ARY, which is one of the top news channels, so it's like CNN in Pakistan. And he had his own shows. He was an anchor as well as an investigative reporter. And I've watched some of his reports. And whatever he says, he does the research and he brings up all the evidence in front of you. So whatever he says is based on fact. He was started to be threatened because he started to ask the wrong questions, if you see what I mean, from the Pakistani government and from the Chief of Army Staff. Nobody challenged the army up to this point. In a major way, in such an open way that journalists started to do after Imran Khan's ouster. And the army's response, and well, some people say it's the government doing it, some people say it's the army doing it, but it's quite obvious it's the all-powerful armies behind everything. The army's response has been to try and shut down any dissent at all. And they've done it in a really clumsy, retarded fashion. I mean, it's so pathetic the way they've done it. And all it's done is to actually further enrage the general population on top of the economic crash. So this gentleman, continued to do his reports despite being threatened, and then he would share those threats on his TV channel, that I've been threatened by this, I've been getting these phone calls, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually ARY was barred from broadcast, just taken off the air. Just like that, with no reason, no warning, it was just gone off the air. Now, the equivalent of Ofcom in Pakistan is PEMRA. When the journalists asked them why ARY has been taken off air, they said, we don't know. So the question then is, who took ARY off air? Now, ARY stayed off air, and you can imagine when a channel goes off, they had 20,000 employees. When a channel goes off air, they're risking the livelihoods of 20,000 of their employees. And eventually, after, I think it's about 3 or 4 weeks, eventually ARY was allowed back on air only after Arshad Sharif and one other journalist had been removed from their schedules. All of a sudden. No warning, no nothing. So this journalist is now out in the open. He doesn't have ARY support. And all the other channels that wanted to take him, because everyone was running after him, say, well, we'll take you. Another channel tried to take him on. They were taken off air. Okay. Another journalist called Imran Khan was arrested, exactly like Arshad Sharif. He was arrested, he was tortured, he was beaten for no reason. And then he was released after it all went to court, even though, I'll cut a long story short. So all this started happening. Another journalist, Jamil Farooq, he was picked up at the airport. Again, no reason, but except the fact that they work for these channels, and their narrative was tended to be seen as anti-government and not so pro-government, not so pro-army. Jamil Farooq never even said anything seriously. He was one of these, he did his reports in a sarcastic, comedic way. So he would do it not directly, but indirectly, in a very satirical fashion. He was taken, beaten up, and his so-called software was updated. When he came back on air, totally different. When ARY came back on air, they then refused to cover Imran Khan's broadcast. So his speeches, his rallies, didn't cover them to keep whoever allowed them back on air, to keep them happy. The same then happened with another news channel, Bol, whose ratings went through the roof after clearly ARY's narrative had changed. Everyone started watching Bol channel, and the same thing happened with them. They are suddenly taken off air. They were suddenly starting to show Imran Khan speeches. Their ratings went through the roof. They're suddenly taken off air. Now, Bol has decided to stick their ground. So they're saying, fine, you want to take us off air? They did a really good streaming service, internet, and carried on running their show. They couldn't control Bol, and Bol decided that it was going to be even more vociferous in what it was trying to do. This is carried on. Now, Arshad Sharif, after he got removed from ARY, he was hounded. He was threatened. People out, and when I say threatened, I'm talking about people turning up at his door, people hanging around outside his door with guns, etc., etc., etc. His family being threatened. Another journalist whose father got removed from his job. They shut down his business. I mean, these kinds of harassments to journalists were now becoming commonplace. Arshad Sharif was then threatened that he was going to be picked up as well. He decided he was going to leave the country. He left the country and went to Dubai. The same night he left for the country, ARY's vice president, I believe, the same thing happened to him. Police jumped over his home, personal home, harassed his family, arrested him, took him in, tortured him, beat him, and we still don't know what's happened to the guy, what happened to him, but he's gone completely silent. ARY's Arshad Rashid Arshad Sharif, he went to Dubai. His visa was running out. He still had 10 days left for his visa in Dubai. And apparently there are rumors that somebody from the Pakistani army contacted the family the ruling family in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and asked them to either bring Sharif back to Pakistan or send him on, move him on. Whatever the truth, and that's still being investigated, Sharif leaves Dubai because he's still under threat in Pakistan, and he goes to Kenya. In Kenya, he's then, I think 3 or 4 days later, he comes across, and this is the story of the Kenyans now. So according to Kenyan media, Kenyan news reports, the initial report was a child had been kidnapped, a roadblock had been set up, Arshad Sharif car matched the child, kidnapped car, and he drove past, didn't stop. We shot at the car, and it was killed by accident. Then the reports came that actually it was a stolen car they were looking for, because the media started saying, well, hold on, why did you shoot at a car that may have contained a kidnapped child? Then the story changed to...
So they're making it up as they're going along, basically.
Literally. I mean, if you go back and have a look at Kenyan media, they changed their story. The police changes their story 4 times in 3 days. So then their story came out that it was a stolen car they were looking for, and then the media started asking. Kenyan media, forget the world media, Kenyan media said, what was the car that was being stolen? First it was, we don't know, then it was a Mercedes-Benz, and then it was a Mercedes-Benz van. Now the car that Imran Khan, Arshad Sharif was killed in was a Land Cruiser V8. A Mercedes-Benz van and a Land Cruiser V8 is a massive difference, 2 completely different number plates as well.
So, I mean, basically, this was just a hit. You know, it was an assassination.
It was an absolute hit. Yeah.
I mean, I'm reminded a bit when talking about this I remember when he was releasing the information about the gain of function research, Peter Daszak at the Wuhan lab and Eco Health Alliance on his Tucker Carlson program. He actually did a program himself where he said, well, I'm getting these messages from the National Security Agency, threatening me, So that's Tucker Carlson on Fox News.
Yeah.
We've also had here in Bristol, Alex Seabrook, who's one of the local democracy reporters, basically being banned by the Mayor Marvin Rees, the Labour Mayor, from press conferences because he asked a rather awkward question about does it really make sense for the mayor to be flying 7,000, 8,000 miles in order to do a talk which he could do about climate change on Zoom. And then for asking a cheeky question, well, it's not a cheeky question, it's a very good question.
It's a legitimate question, absolutely.
He's banned. Now, it's good to see in Bristol, the reaction being that the other journalists in the city, from BBC, ITV, Bristol Post, Bristol 24/7, etc., all boycotted those press conferences because Marvin Rees tried to pull this little trick with picking off journalists who asked him awkward questions. So, it's quite a contrast, luckily, between Bristol and Pakistan. But you're painting a picture of behaviour of the Pakistani authorities, particularly the army, Farooq, literally of a mafia running the country, a fascist mafia.
And that's and you're not far off in that assessment. I mean, that's what is absolutely enraging the Pakistani public. And as I say, it's the young people that are leading this. But having said the young people are leading this, people attending Imran Khan's rallies are families. So the elders are there, the women are there, little children are there, and obviously the youth contingent is there. But in terms of what they're doing to the Pakistani media is, again, it is nothing short of fascism. I mean, the power has got to their head, and they think they can do and say what they want. Now,
it sounds to me as if the Pakistani authorities are spending much more time trying to destroy their opposition than they are actually running and managing the country. Martin Summers, what do you make of what's going on over there? I mean, I'm comparing these disappearances, the threats and things to Pinochet, etc. Is that over the top?
No, obviously not. I mean, there hasn't been continuous democracy in Pakistan since independence, and the army have openly ruled the country at various stages, and they're definitely the power behind the throne. and they work very closely with the United States.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is quite common in the developing world, where comprador elites are bought by the Western powers, and they're not really they're ruling in their own interests, obviously, but also in the interests of foreign powers like the US.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the youngsters, because it's their future that these people are destroying, and there's a wrestle for the future of Pakistan, Farooq, isn't there?
And that's exactly how Imran Khan's defined it. I mean, he started today because they buried Arshad Sharif yesterday in what I can only describe as probably the largest funeral that has ever taken place in Pakistan and Islamabad. I mean, in the history of Pakistan. I mean, it was massive. You just have to look at the video of that. And this is for a journalist, for an investigative journalist, who all he did was speak the truth. And that's what people are saying. And even at his funeral, the chants from the public were, freedom will take, your dad will give us freedom, we'll snatch our freedom. Yeah, saying that was basically directed at the army, right? Now, today, Imran Khan has decided against his will, he didn't want to do it, but because of the killing of Arshad Sharif, he's now been left no choice, he feels. It's now or never. So he's now decided he's going to go for what he's calling the Long March. So he starts in Lahore, is going to go through major Pakistani cities, literally at walking pace. And by next week, he's going to end up in Islamabad. And effectively, by the number of people that he's expecting, is lay siege to the capital of the country, including the headquarters of the Pakistani army and the seat of power in Pakistan. And he's going to lay siege to that. It's going to be inevitable. Whether he says, he denies he's going to lay siege, he says he's doing a peaceful demonstration, protest about what's happening in the country. But effectively, because of the numbers of people that will walk with him, it will effectively be a siege. There's no way around it. Now, the Interior Ministry, the murderer that is the Home Minister at the moment, he's already laid out the gauntlet. And he says, if you come, I've bought even more modern tear gas. I've got drones, he's saying, with glee. He says, I've got drones, and I'll be firing drones at you and your people as soon as you arrive. So he's preparing for a war. Now, the Pakistani army yesterday, in desperation, for the first time ever, the head of the ISI, the Pakistani Secret Service, alongside the Chief of Army Staff's representative, did a press conference. The ISI has never done a press conference in its history. This was the first time they've done a press conference. And they looked scared. They looked incompetent, and they looked disheveled. And it was because of what Imran Khan has decided, that he's not backing down. Everything they do to try and bring him down, there's deep fake videos of him. They've made all kinds of accusations against him. They've thrown corruption allegations against him. Everything. And all that it does is further increase Imran Khan's popularity. And now, in what Imran Khan is describing, and everyone else in Pakistan, all the commentators, this is the pivotal moment. So Imran Khan says 26 years of his struggle, of his political struggle, to get true freedom from Pakistan is going to culminate now. It starts here. The final phase starts here. So Imran Khan yesterday made what he calls a final, he actually referred to it as a final time to talk to his people. He says, listen to what I've said to you today. Remember the day, and remember my words today, because I don't know if I'll get the chance to speak to you again. Obviously referring to he's a name on a target as well. Yeah. And the only thing that's keeping him alive is the number of people that currently support him, and that it could go out of control in Pakistan if they did assassinate him, because that would be the easiest option. But the numbers
it's an amazing picture you paint there of the ISI press conference with these people who are now running the country, actually rather concerned that perhaps it's not going their way. And obviously they're being lent on, they're being blackmailed, they're being threatened, they're being, possibly their lives threatened by a foreign power. And so, I wonder, maybe Martin, you can chip in here, how you think this one might go. It's interesting, Imran Khan literally, today or yesterday, depending on which part of the world you're in, saying that this could be my last broadcast. Well,
it could go either way, couldn't it? I mean, it's hard to judge from this distance.
I mean, surely it's very difficult for the Americans to remote control Pakistan from so far away. They'd have to have a whole load of more American forces in the country, or recruit a whole load of gangsters, sort of organised crime mafia within Pakistan, if they really want to keep a hold of the place.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Pakistani army is, it's embedded with the US military infrastructure going back to the 1980s and before. Right. And his daughter Benazir Bhutto, she went to the same college I went to at St Catherine's College in Oxford. And when I was there, she left just before I arrived. But the year before I arrived, the ISA tried to assassinate her by trying to burn down her staircase in the college. And everybody knew who had done it and what it was about. And so the army has always been the power behind the throne, as it were, in Pakistan. But at certain periods, with US support, they have been the government. The army ran the country. And this was during the war against the Soviets in Afghanistan, which obviously had huge impacts within Pakistan. And of course, the creation of Al-Qaeda and all the rest of it by the ISI working with the Americans and the British. MI6 took the lead role in Operation Cyclone, which was, funneling weaponry and other things into the struggle in Afghanistan. A lot of it funded by the heroin trade. Well, Commerce International collapsed because that was the source of a lot of what was going on. And Pakistan is not the only country in the developing world to have this kind of dysfunctional politics, but it's a major country, and it's one with great, it's got a great strategic significance. The Chinese are trying to build links to Gwadar on the Arabian coast, and the Americans are very unhappy about that. They want to try and stop that because they don't want that kind of development in Central Asia. And of course, also Imran Khan was trying to open dialogue with the Indians and the Russians. He's not, he's trying to solve problems rather than create them. And that's exactly why he's such a threat for them.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll definitely keep an eye on all this, Farooq. Do you want to just wind up with a final thought about how things may go now?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest change in the last 6 months is the Pakistani general view of their own army. 6 months ago, I guarantee you, 6 months ago, you would not have heard anyone challenge or criticize the Pakistani army. It wasn't done because it was like, you're feeding the help, India, you're feeding all the other enemies of the state, because that's how the army always used their propaganda to make it so that anyone who criticized the army, or you're doing this on behalf of India or whoever the enemy was. 6 months later, and the perception of the army and the volume of attacks on the army and the way the army is generally now perceived in the country is a 180-degree turn. And that is, I think, a massive development, because as Martin said earlier, the army's always been in power. And in fact, what you've had here in March, when they removed Imran, was basically a soft coup. They put puppets in front and they took control of the country again, but with an image that we're still democratic. In fact, they control all the powers, and the subsequent response they've done to journalists and the crackdown on the media has proven that it's not, because when you ask the government, they say we're not doing anything. When you ask the police, they're saying we're not doing anything. When you ask the judges, they say we're not doing anything. So the question is, who's doing it? And it's the army that is doing it all. And that, with the age of TikTok and social media and Twitter and all of that, suddenly people have woken up that the army is not the good force in the country that everyone once believed it to be.
Well, it could be their days are numbered. We shall see. Yeah. Very much watch this space, Farooq. Okay, well, thanks ever so much for just refreshing all of our memories. And also, of course, much of this has just simply not been reported here, even though, as you said, it's the biggest
Yeah,
the
and
biggest,
that's a surprise to me because
Pakistani.
that's been a big surprise to me because I would have thought, nations on the side of right and freedom of speech would have at least jumped in.
But it's not just that, is it? We've got a massive Pakistani community in the UK, that wants to know about all this, and the media is quite obviously, it's got its jackboot down on these stories. So, what's a good way to keep up with this? Do you think? Is any particular news outlets in Pakistan in English that we can follow or not?
Yeah, you can follow Bol. I think they've got a good English language, and you can follow BOL, just Bol TV. They've got a good English language issue. There's the Dawn newspaper. There's the Express Tribune. All of these Pakistani newspapers. Just type in Pakistan news and they'll all come up.
Well, okay, that's fantastic. Anyway, from the Pakistan Association in Bristol, thanks very much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And we're going to have, Martin and I are going to have a look at this new book, finally wind up by having a look at this new book by Whitney Webb, One Nation Under Blackmail, where we're going to hear a clip now, 15 minutes or so, well, nearly 15 minutes from, as our final clip, from the podcast Financial Rebellion, which I think is a British, comes out of the UK. But Whitney, she begins by explaining her sort of investigative journalist role. She talks about herself as an independent researcher. Actually, I think she is an investigative journalist. That's what she is. She says that the term has been weaponized and she doesn't really like it. But anyway, I'm saying Whitney is an investigative journalist, probably one of the best, if not the best, on the planet. It does rather reflect on the story we've just heard about the United States controlling Pakistan through the CIA. And she talks here about, and we'll just have a brief chat about it when it's finished, Martin. But I think it's an amazing job she's done in getting this book out, One Nation Under Blackmail. So let's hear from Whitney Webb now.
The mainstream narrative since Epstein's death has been, oh, well, he's gone. He was the one bad billionaire in the world, and so everything's fine now that he's disappeared. But no, there was a network that existed well before he came on the scene and continues to operate after his death. And in order to get to the root of the problem, we have to understand the bigger picture, right? And see Epstein as a symptom of a very broken, very corrupt system instead of this standalone one bad guy who